What's up, everybody? SuperTrucks fan here, and today I want to compare the Camaro ZL1 that I just reviewed with the Challenger Hellcat and the Shelby GT350. Now, before I go any further, I want to say that I'm still sick. I've been sick for almost a week here, so if I appear a little disheveled and sound a little bit off, that is the reason why. But I wanted to do this video here while it was still fresh in my mind with all three cars, and a lot of you were requesting that I kind of compare them all now that I've driven all three. And so yeah, I'll just get right down to the first and I think the most common question that people were asking me about the ZL1 is they said, how does it feel compared to a Hellcat as far as acceleration? Which felt faster? And the simple answer to that is the ZL1. And I think the reason why is because of the Hellcat's skinny tires. The Hellcats only run 275 wide tires, and so for 700 horsepower, that's not enough in the back to put the power down well. And so because of that, the ZL1 Camaro has 305 wide tires in the back, and it's only putting down 650 horsepower, which it's less of a challenge for those tires than little 275 wide tires desperately trying to put down 707 horsepower with a Hellcat. So I think that's honestly the main reason why, because I remember when I reviewed the Hellcat, first gear was unusable. I mean, honestly, the owner was like, don't even bother with first gear because it's just wheel spin. So I was doing second gear rolling pulls in the Hellcat because that was the only way you could put power down. Even then, it was still really wanting to get squirrely. So I think that's, again, it's just differences in how they set the cars up. I think the Hellcat is fun because it is tail happy and first gear is unusable, but that's fun. It's almost like the BRZ formula, of skinnier tires makes it a lot more fun. And so it's fun, but it's not fast. And so that's kind of the thing with the Hellcat. Now, obviously, it's very easy to fix the Hellcat's tire issue. Just simply get different wheels and tires that are wider and you're set. But, so yes, I would say that the ZL1, I'm comparing these cars all stock. So in their stock configurations, the ZL1 felt faster in a straight line to me than the Hellcat. Like I said, you swap the tires on the Hellcat and that might be a different story. But again, I mean, even with, it's just the ZL1, it's so good with its traction control systems, putting that power down, especially that 10-speed automatic transmission really likes to be super quick on the upshifts. And so I think, the Camaro just feels faster, and that's just the way it is. Speaking about those shifts, though, that's the next thing, is a lot of people were saying, how does this, 10-speed here in the new Camaro ZL1, how does it compare to the 8-speed, which is actually a ZF 8-speed? Now, Dodge rebrands it the Torque Flight 8-speed automatic, but it is a ZF 8-speed that they buy from ZF and put in the Challenger. And this is where, now, if you remember in my ZL1 review, I said that the 10-speed is much improved over the 8-speed, but it still isn't the best. I think that the ZF 8-speed still has slightly sharper upshifts, and I think that the downshifts are roughly the same between the two. But I feel like, especially you can even watch the review of me in the Hellcat, when I'm banging through the upshifts in the Hellcat, it's slamming into gears. I think that the 10-speed and the Camaro is actually smoother with its upshifts, but I think that it's actually a little bit snappier and a little bit quicker in the Hellcat there because of the ZF 8-speed, which is the ZF 8-speed is what they put in the F-types, and I mean, there's all the German vehicles that have it. And they're both spectacular. Now, neither of them are as good as a good dual clutch, like the BMW DCT, Porsche PDK. All of those are still much faster and blow both automatics out of the water. But, when you're comparing just normal torque converter automatics, it's actually still one of the best. They're both spectacular for sure. And I know a lot of you still strongly prefer the manual, so that's probably a moot point with the automatics. But for those that are cross-shopping an automatic Hellcat with an automatic Camaro, then I would say that the Hellcat is still slightly sharper in the transmission. But again, I would need more seat time in both. But just from my first impressions of driving both of them for a couple of hours, I would say that it's probably a little bit sharper in the Hellcat. Speaking of sharpness, though, let's talk about handling. Now, I haven't mentioned the Shelby yet, and the main reason why is because, obviously, first, the Shelby isn't available with an automatic, so it doesn't even compete, if you're looking for an automatic version of one of these cars. But then also, the Shelby is obviously the slowest one of the group, and it's down on horsepower big time. The 0 to 60 times and all that are nearly a second slower. And so, you know, the Shelby, I don't think really even competes with these two. But one thing, you know, is the handling. That is one aspect that, of course, the Shelby does compete very well against these two. And that's where almost the Charger or the Challenger doesn't even really compete. But I'm going to talk about the handling of all three. So, I would say, obviously, the Challenger Hellcat is the one that it's not even worth trying, because it's 4,500 pounds, basically, and so it's just very heavy, and, you know, in addition to those stock tires being skinny with a heavy car, it's just not the best as far as handling goes, and so I don't think Dodge is even concerned about competing. If you want a vehicle that handles, I mean, the Hellcat isn't terrible. I actually drove Hellcats on track in the rain, and they are good handling vehicles for what they are, but whenever you compare them with the competition, that's where it kind of all falls apart. So, you know, we'll just kind of put the Hellcat off to the side here for this discussion for right now, and just talk about the Camaro ZL1 versus the Shelby GT350. And now these two are very similar in their tire setups, only the Shelby's got slightly wider front tires at 295 in the front versus 285 in the front for the ZL1, and they both have 305s in the rear. Now, the ZL1 handles nearly as well as the GT350. I personally, now I don't know, you know, the actual G's that they will pull. Maybe the, you know, Camaro actually does grip as well as the Shelby, but I know that the Shelby's about 100 pounds or so lighter than the ZL1, and so the lighter weight combined with what I think is a slightly lower center of gravity in the Shelby, just because they mounted that flat plane crank 5.2 very low in there. If you compare a normal GT Mustang to the Shelby, it's just crazy how much lower that whole front end is, and so I think that really helped. You know, not that the ZL1 has a high center of gravity. Again, I'm splitting hairs with all of this comparison, but you know, I think that whenever I was turning in the Shelby, it just felt a little more eager to turn in, a little more lighter in its feeling, and so, you know, but like I said, the ZL1 does it 9/10 or 9.5 of what the Shelby does, and so especially whenever you're talking about the same money, basically, you know, 65,000 bucks here for both. I think that the Camaro does it so closely, if not even, it still might be better. And of course, if you even want better handling, you can go for the 1LE package of the ZL1 that they're making available, and I'm sure that will certainly feel even better, although you'll never get rid of that weight. I think it's still going to be a little bit heavier than the Shelby, but not by much. And so I think, you know, as far as an all-around package, the ZL1 is the one that kind of hits all the boxes and does everything really, really well. Everything really well. It's got the power to keep up with the Hellcat. It's got the handling to keep up with the Shelby. So it's kind of mastered everything, where the Hellcat's really good in a straight line, the Shelby's really good in the corners, and neither of them cross over into the other, really, and the Camaro kind of bridges the gap and does it all. And that's what's really impressive about the ZL1. And it does it, like I said, all for the same price, roughly. So it kind of makes both the Shelby and the Hellcat seem very one-dimensional, where it's just, you know, they have one goal, one purpose, and that's it. And I think, you know, we've seen spy shots of Ford working on a much more aggressive Mustang, and so maybe that is some kind of GT500 or whatever they end up calling it, to kind of rival the Camaro, hopefully. And so that's something that we can look forward to, especially if you're a Ford fan, you know. But I mean, like I said, I'm driving my Mustang here, but I have to give credit where it's due, and the ZL1 is currently the best buy, I think, in all of these. Now, having said that, you know, getting beyond the performance stuff, there are still reasons, you know, to kind of debate the three different models, and it all comes down to personal preference, like always. But I'm going to get into some of the subjective stuff, comparing all three cars now. Now, I know a lot of people, all they care about is the performance numbers and 0 to 60s, and whatever wins is what they like. But, you know, for a lot of people that actually live with these cars and are going to be daily driving them, there are other things to take into account. And so, you know, one of the sore spots of the Camaro is always its visibility, and that's one thing that both the Challenger and the Mustang have a much better time with, is the visibility. I mean, you know, my Mustang, you have large, not huge, but, you know, larger side windows here than you have in the Camaro, and, you know, the Challenger is even more roomy. I mean, you have more space because it's a bigger vehicle in general, but the glass is also a little bit larger as well, so you have excellent visibility in a Challenger as well, whereas the Camaro, It's very tight and it feels like a bunker, like you're driving around in a tank. A lot of people like that. It's not a deal breaker for most people. They get used to the visibility. It's not the end of the world, but it is harder to see out of, and that is just, you know, the simple fact of the windows being smaller. So that's just something, again, it comes down to a test drive or riding in a friend's or something like that to kind of get a feel for whether the visibility is something that would really bother you. Other things, you know, are the subjective things like the styling on the exterior and the interior, you know, because I think they're all relatively similar as far as interiors go, with the quality of the interiors is what I mean. And so, you know, it just depends on which style you like better. A lot of people really don't like the Camaro interior. I actually think it's quite nice. I still prefer the Mustang interior better, and I like the design of it a little bit better. But they're both certainly nice. I think actually the Challenger is in some areas less nice. It's not quite as special feeling, but then the Challenger has some ways where it is a little bit better. And this isn't a specific thing to the Hellcat and the ZL1 and the Shelby, because I talked about a lot of these same differences in my normal comparison of the standard Challenger Scat Pack and the Mustang GT and the Camaro SS that I did last year. And so you can go watch that for all my in-depth stuff. But, you know, the interiors on all of them, again, it just comes down to sitting in them and seeing which ones, you know, you like better. But the styling is something that kind of kills it for some people, regardless of whatever car it is. But especially the Camaro is the one that I think is the sticking point for most people. And, you know, me personally, I still like the styling of the Shelby a little bit better. The Camaro looks very, very mean, especially in the ZL1 trim. But I think that especially in the back end, both the Challenger Hellcat and the Shelby GT350 just look a little more special in the back end. You know, with the Challenger's big, wide taillights and the Mustang's three-dimensional tri-bars there that always look very cool. The Camaro is just, that's where it falls a little flat, is the back end of the ZL1. But you know, so I mean, there's all those types of subjective things, but you know, so there's all kinds of ways that personal preference can fit in, and just because someone doesn't buy ZL1 doesn't mean they're crazy. You know, there are certainly other good reasons to go for the others as well, and of course we know Dodge is working on the Demon, which will be out here very, very soon, and then I think that will be the straight line king once again, you know. But I think that the ZL1 still is really the best package all around, where it does everything so well with the handling, with the power. But yeah, so that's kind of just tossing around the differences here between the different vehicles. But you know, for those that are asking, you know, what I personally would rather have out of the three, it's still really tough to say. I think it would either come down to the ZL1 or the Shelby to me, most likely, just because I enjoy handling, and so that's where the Hellcat, you know, wouldn't quite fill that for me. But fortunately, I'm not in any position to consider those. They're both out of my price range, and I'm perfectly happy just with my standard Mustang GT here. But it's a great time to be alive. We can enjoy these awesome vehicles while we can here. Hopefully, you know, before all the electric cars take over. But yeah, so anyway, that's all my thoughts here comparing these three. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below, and thank you guys very much for watching. I'll see you next time. Take care.